It is now my great pleasure to introduce a man who needs no introduction, a laid-off geologist, brewpub entrepreneur, former mayor of Denver, former governor of Colorado, and now a U.S. senator from the great state of Colorado. John Hickenlooper is back on the podcast. Hey, Senator.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're great.
Good.
It's good to see you again. Thanks for showing up for the third, fourth, or fifth time. We'll figure it out.
Or second.
So, yeah, from the cheap seats here in Colorado, it seems like you just went through one of the wildest weeks in Washington that we have seen, and you played a pretty crucial role in quite a bit of it. Let's start with the $1.8 billion Insurrection Slush Fund. You brought a pretty clever amendment to the GOP's ICE reconciliation bill, essentially causing the GOP to give up on it entirely. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, just basically I got pissed off like everybody. But we were sitting in my office trying to think of, what do you do when you're pissed off and there's no immediate place to vent? And one thing you do is you figure out, all right, where can I hurt them? Where can I cause them sufficient embarrassment to make them think twice? And, they were going to go ram through this ridiculous thing, $72 billion for the, ICE and the secret police and the border control, all that stuff. And at the same day, the next day, or that day, they come out with this ridiculous plan. They're going to create a slush fund to make retributions, allegedly because President Trump's, financial IRS data got leaked along with about 60,000 other people, but somehow he was harmed so sufficiently, he sued the government for $10 billion. And now he, out of the goodness of his heart, he was negotiating that down to 1.776. So called $1.8 billion. And he was going to use taxpayer dollars to pay for that. And that's crazy. It just enraged us. And so we said, all right, we'll make an amendment that will deny in any way that the taxpayer money can be used for the slush fund. And we'll put that and make the Republicans vote on that, because that would force, 12, 15, 20 Republican senators to break from the fold. And that would, Trump would go nuts. And they don't want to cross Trump. So it was kind of, I don't want to sound like I'm sadistic, but it was kind of delightful. I mean, it was, what's that German word for when you take some pleasure in the misery of others?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. That's what I had a moment of Schadenfreude.
So in the press and the commentary you did about this, you specifically mentioned Tina Peters, who unfortunately, in our opinion, just got her sentence commuted by other governor, Jared Polis. As a former governor yourself, I mean, you're familiar with the process of offering clemency and pardons and all that sort of stuff. Is there any scenario in which this decision to give Tina Peters a shorter sentence or clemency made sense to you?
Well, I mean, she's guilty of sin. I mean, she knew what she was doing. She was buying into this whole thing that he really won the election in 2020. She was trying to make our election machines vulnerable to future attacks. So there's no question she's guilty. She was, prosecuted by a Republican district attorney, found guilty by, Mesa County jury. I've got to guess it's 2/3 Republican. So yeah, I disagree with all that part. We did attach it to this amendment just because she is someone who the president has specifically mentioned.
Right.
He's someone who she's been politicized. She's been harmed. She got convicted and an unfair sentence because of politics, is what his argument was. So she would benefit from this slush fund. So we just stuck her in it as well. I mean, the more the merrier is what I say.
There were reports that Republicans were upset about the slush fund, the $1 billion for the ballroom, but also unhappy that Trump backed Ken Paxton over John Cornyn in Texas. I want to ask you about that last part. How important do you think that is? And how do Republicans feel about Cornyn within the caucus?
Well, both John Cornyn and Bill Cassidy, who both got on the wrong side of the president for different reasons, but basically the same kind of reasons. They didn't bend their knee and bow down to him. That's one of those things that we'll see how that plays out, in this November, because everyone says, Tallarico, he's great, he's wonderful, but he couldn't win Texas. Now they're saying he actually might win Texas, which means they'll probably have to spend about $100 billion more money in Texas to win
Right.
it.
It's
So
crazy. I mean, Texas is always like the one that gets away every election cycle. We
yeah.
spend an unbelievable amount of money in Texas and lose anyway. But maybe, just maybe, this is the moment where we have such a good candidate and they have such a bad one that we can pull it off.
Well, between Bill Cassidy and John Cornyn, you really have two rock solid senators, at least from a Republican point of view. I've got I've got a lot of bones to pick with both of those guys.
Sure.
The way I look at it, so far, most of these senators haven't stood up and pushed back against Trump for a lot of different things they could have done. I mean, he's just gone over the top again and again. Let's start with the war. But anyway, that's a separate battle. I think the fact that I don't think we'll win Louisiana from the guy, the woman actually that beat Cassidy, but I do think that Tallarico, I mean, James seems like he's got a lot of momentum and strength, and he's willing to put in the work. And his opponent's a nitwit. No two ways about it.
Do you think Republicans in the Senate, after what happened to Cassidy and what happened to Cornyn, are they being reminded that this loyalty is a one-way street? Or have they always known that and they just ignored it?
Yeah, I think they've always known it. I think it's very hard on them. I mean, if you look at with the one big beautiful bill, you can't take $1 trillion out of our healthcare system over the course of 10 years and not expect incredible damage. I was down today in Colorado Springs, and we did a roundtable at the University of Colorado Health Center down there on the north end of town. And we had some people come in and tell their stories. And there was one young woman named Leah, and her daughter is, quadriplegic, has to use a ventilator, has to, gets all her food through a tube. She is nonverbal. I mean, she's like 12 years old, and she has just had the toughest challenges in her life. Both of her parents, full time, spend their days and nights caring for her.
Right.
And they've got this little teeny house that they were lucky enough to find. They get paid a very small amount of money as the caretakers. I mean, otherwise it would take four positions, probably 24 hours a day to take care of her. And I mean, they're about to face a 40% cut, and they're not sure they can keep their house. They're not sure what happens if they can't keep taking care of their daughter. It's not like there are any backup plans. And this is just one. I go down the list of all the people we've talked to where their lives are being ruined because all these Republican senators and the Republican House wouldn't stand up to the president, and they didn't have the guts to say, we can't afford to give, the largest corporations, the wealthiest billionaires, a gigantic tax break, because the way they're paying for that tax break is snatching away healthcare from millions and millions of people that are really going to suffer.
It's weird where they do sometimes draw the line, though, because I agree with you. Like, they could have stopped this. I think in the House, there was only a 1 or 2 vote margin and passed that stupid bill. And in the Senate, it was really tight as well. The SAVE Act, which is Donald Trump's voter suppression bill, right? The so-called SAVE Act, it failed in the Senate after Lisa Murkowski and Tom Tillis, who's not running again, so he has nothing left to lose, basically broke with leadership and tanked that bill. They let this horrible healthcare nightmare occur on the so-called big beautiful bill. But over here, they're standing up to Trump. Do you have a sense of why they would defy him on the quote unquote SAVE Act, but not on something that harms so many people?
I have no answer. Again, and I made a real run at 5 or 6 of the Republicans because I just couldn't believe they could be that cruel,
right?
And really heartless, and they are. There was that fear that Trump would end their careers. The rumors around Tillis were that he was going to get a $25 million primary. There was going to be nothing but attack ads and hate ads, and they weren't going to worry about whether it was true or not, but they were going to so damage his reputation, his legacy, that he wouldn't, his children and his grandchildren wouldn't want to be seen in public with him anywhere in the state. And that's, you can't have that kind of intimidation in a democracy. It's just
No.
it really means that a very small group of people are seizing enormous control over everything. That in the last election, the tally I saw, I'm sure you saw this as well, that of the the largest amount, or like 25 or 35% of all the Republican money came from 10 billionaires that each gave over $100 million. That's nuts, right? That's crazy. That's not democracy.
No. I want to also, we'll get into the democracy part of the Iran war here in a minute, but you were one of the loudest voices against that from day one. You said in March there was no articulated goal, strategy, or endgame. Over the weekend, there was talk about a peace deal, but now as we're recording, it sounds like the ceasefire might be falling apart as well. Do you have any better sense of what we're actually doing there and what winning even looks like?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I protested against the Vietnam War. I was adamant that these Caribbean diplomacy that Reagan did, the invasion of Nicaragua, things like that, were embarrassing to us as a country. I opposed when I first ran for mayor of Denver was when we invaded Iraq,
Right.
and again, no real reason that we had to do that. That wasn't something that was absolutely essential. And now, you remember the anchorman Dan Rather?
Of course.
So I was in Austin a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, but right, the war was now pretty far into where it is now, and which is to say, mired in muck. And we went over and saw him after I was doing a fundraiser down there, and we went over and spent an hour with him. And he's sharp as a tack. I think he's 91 years old. And I asked him just at the end as we were about to leave, I was saying, well, you've been around the block a few times. What do you see as the best of the off ramps? What's the best off ramp for President Trump to use? And he looked at me and his face fell. And he looked at me and he says, there are no good off ramps.
Oh,
and that's where we are. I think that we're going to come out of this much worse than we went in, and we will have spent, by the time we rebuild all the missiles and munitions, and we'll probably have spent over $200 billion. And they're going to be charging a toll on the Strait of Hormuz, almost certainly, is what the sound is. That we won't have gotten any of their highly enriched radioactive materials, uranium. They will still have that. I mean, they're going to have everything they would have had if we'd just stuck with the JCPOA, which I've got a copy of it here in the house. So I take it and look at it, and I say, what have we got? And how many lives have we killed? How much money have we spent? And we're going to end up worse off than this.
Oh, yeah. Objectively worse off. They weren't tolling the Strait of Hormuz. Like there were actual inspections on the nuclear enrichment programs. Like all that stuff is out the window now. We are poorer. There are fewer people alive, to your point, and on both sides, like we've lost American service members in this pointless war, to say nothing of God knows how many Iranians have been killed in this ridiculous excursion. The administration declared the war was, quote, terminated on May 1st. We're recording this on May 26th. They're still shooting at each other. Apparently, as some kind of legal maneuver to sidestep the 60-day war powers deadline. And U.S. ships, like we said, are continuing to blockade Iranian oil exports right now. Does the Senate, do you and your colleagues have any actual leverage at this point?
Well, we're going to keep doing War Powers Act every week. Good. And we will get the Republicans are being backed into a corner that they can't stand. And I think this is all part of, it's just adding to this cost of living emergency where, Trump's plan to sell public lands, we beat that back to a pulp, but the cruel healthcare cuts that are raising everybody's cost. I mean, you look at all the places, the tariffs and the burden that's putting on everything that people buy. He's made it impossible for the Republicans to run for re-election. So 1/3 of the Senate is up this cycle. And, maybe you were in a state that used to be safe, like Iowa or Texas, but those states are in play right now, Alaska. And you can see why, because he's done nothing. He was like a trying to do a magic act, right? Well, here you see it. Here's right what it looks like. Not there. And it is cruel. It is the ultimate harm to this country is going to take a decade at least to rebuild and forget about the trust. I mean, rebuilding the trust that Americans need to have in their government is probably going to take a couple decades. But just to get the safety net put back together, just to restructure the scientific research grants and to make sure that we're getting the maximum benefit for what is clearly a foundation of our economy. All this stuff. I mean, Trump will go down as, a demagogue, but as one of the worst, well, I think he'll go down as the worst president in history. Yeah. And all this bad stuff happening. I always thought my mother would tell us the story when we were kids of Nero, the Roman emperor, after the Republic, during this 300-year rule where various Roman emperors did the best they could. And Nero fiddled while Rome burned. I thought, that's crazy. Why would he ever do that? Because he was Trump, right?
Yeah.
That's what Trump is doing. Luckily, Trump can't play the fiddle or we'd really all go berserk.
You mentioned this cost of living emergency. We've heard you use that phrase before. I think everybody feels it. What do you mean when you say it? And how is it different than other inflationary pressures you've seen as you've been in elected office?
Well, this one is insidious because it keeps growing in from all these different directions. So it's like whack-a-mole. But obviously with the war, the energy costs are insane. You couple those with the rise of 40+% rise in fertilizer, and obviously in the drought, the lack of water our farmers have, not just in Colorado, but farmers across the country are trying to decide whether they want to plant. And the tariffs have made it much harder for them to find larger markets and get a better price for the produce and the livestock that they raise. So that's one side of it. So supermarket prices are going up. Housing costs through the roof, right? Yep. It's not everywhere, but it's almost everywhere. And we're not doing anything about it. I signed on and worked with Elizabeth Warren to get the road to housing. I mean, this is going to help us build more housing than anything the federal government's ever done, because housing's killing people. People can't make their mortgages at the end of a year. And, the tariffs, aluminum right now is almost double in this country what it would cost in Europe. So things like, I'm obviously sensitive to aluminum cans for things like craft beer.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, water, soft drinks, everything is in aluminum these days. It's actually, I think many people feel much more sustainable than plastics. And so you've got aluminum, you've got steel. I mean, everything you buy has got these high tariffs in it, and Trump's never going to pay people back, right? Even the parts that a federal judge said were illegal, that the federal government had to pay this money back, they're only going to pay it back to the businesses. And so far, that they're damn slow at that. I'm not sure I believe that they're going to actually be, returning that money. So it is a cost of living. It's not just a crisis; it's a cost of living emergency. And I think that in every place, it's almost as if President Trump was trying to design something that could be a true emergency. So somehow he thinks he's going to ride to the rescue, but I don't think he knows how. I don't think he has a staff that can do that. We're seeing less jobs, more people being laid off. AI is looming over, looking over our shoulder. He's not doing anything. If he had a fiddle, he'd be playing it.
I think that's right. When I first heard you say that phrase, I thought it was dead on. The only thing I would add to it is that it's so frustratingly self-inflicted. The tariffs were not necessary. The Iran war was not necessary. Like, all this stuff he just did on a whim. Biden handed him a pretty good economy and very good recovery that was heading up and to the right. All he had to do was not break it, and he just couldn't help himself. But let's say
you got to give. I mean, what he did do was he made this promise he was going to do massive tax cuts and restore all those tax cuts and more, right? And I mean, to give basically the largest corporations, the Epstein class, these lavish tax cuts, while I guess the estimate is that over the next several years, 31 million people will either lose their health care or their prices, their costs will double. I mean, it's totally self-inflicted, but it was all in pursuit of making these other wealthy billionaires and giant corporations, making them happy.
That's fair. It wasn't just for no reason. It was to pay back all of his donors and benefactors. But let's say that, we're heading toward what appears to be, if not the best, one of the best election cycles of our lifetimes here for Democrats. Let's say Democrats win the House and even the Senate in November. You pointed out a couple states that shouldn't be on the map that are, just because of how unpopular Trump is and how good our candidates are. What package of bills, you mentioned the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, that are Democrats working on right now that can actually attack this cost of living emergency?
So I have a bill in the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee that will take what I started when I was governor, and then Jared Polis took it another step, but it never was comprehensive. It never went all the way in terms of making sure that every price, every cost of healthcare is transparent, that everyone at every stage, we call this patients deserve price tags, but it will be especially powerful when you think of these large corporations. JP Morgan has 130,000 employees that they all get healthcare. And those guys, the minute they sign a deal with Cigna or United Healthcare, they can't see anything. It's totally opaque. So if we want to go on and see whether we get a high quality x-ray at one place or another, we can do that, but our copay is relatively, consumers aren't going to spend that time on it. But the big companies will, and they will. I guarantee when they start comparing one hospital to the other, one pharmaceutical to another, you will see competition prices that we've never seen in modern times in American healthcare. I mean, we're paying double what most industrialized nations are paying, and we're getting worse, higher child mortality. Our life expectancies are diminished. Our quality of life at end of life is diminished. We're paying more than everyone else, and we're getting the worst product. And I think this patients deserve price tags. Again, Bernie Sanders, I wrote an op-ed for it, and we actually ran it in the Sanders Institute. They have their organization has 5 million readers, but we did an op-ed on how powerful transparency is in healthcare and why it is the precursor that will let us get to very quickly universal coverage where everybody has a medical home. And I think that's a big bill. You said the housing. I think we're really ripe to go back to climate change and really focus on some of the things that we've, the basics. When I was governor, we finally got the oil and gas industry to regulate methane, right? And a full court press. We were the first government entity on earth to regulate methane. There's no reason why we can't regulate methane as a starting point for the whole country, but we got to go further than that. Right? We got to go, and it's housing, it's wind, it's going to be geothermal, and it's got to include building the infrastructure to move the electrons from where they're generated to where they're needed. Because it's wind and solar is great, but it's much better if you don't have to build as many batteries with it, and that means efficiently getting it to where it can be most useful. Anyway, I think there's a climate change bill there. When I worked on the Inflation Reduction Act, which in its time was the single largest to address climate change, $1.4 trillion, 99% of it to address climate change. And we almost didn't get it through. I can remember many, many meetings with Joe Manchin just to make sure he was still on board. And we stuck with it and we got it done. We need to be more strategic. I don't think we need to match that in terms of the amount of money we spend, but I think we have to match it and exceed it in the impact and how we get more citizens and empower them to do what needs to be done to make sure we don't slip off. We're in danger of going so far off the edge with climate change that it will take many decades to rebuild, and the economic and environmental devastation together will be, I look at some of these stories of, it's not just the polar bears in the Arctic, but animals all over the world in unique habitats. They're going to get wiped out. And what a loss.
Right. The economy and the war in Iran have overshadowed what was the big story to begin the year, the immigration crackdowns, the deaths in Minnesota. What more could Senate Democrats be doing to rein in ICE, do you think?
Well, I mean, we put them off for 2 more weeks from passing their bill. 2 weeks ago before we went on recess. We got to push as hard as we can push. They've I mean, this is something, if you'd ever told me that we would have federal officers from any agency
Right.
that would be pulling over vehicles, breaking into people's homes with no warrant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grabbing U.S. citizens, beating them, dragging them out the door, again, no warrant, shooting them to death on the street when they're protesting, I would have said, you're crazy. And yet they feel totally free. They don't feel there's any restraint on them, any responsibility. And I was mayor of Denver. When I first became mayor of Denver, we had a 15-year-old black kid got shot in his own front hall. And we
Right.
began 2.5 years of massive reforms. And trust me, Denver police officers deal with a lot of drug cartels, dangerous people. They don't wear masks. Like,
Right.
that's insane to say that ICE needs masks because they might get doxxed in some way and that could put them at risk. That's just crazy. ICE does not deal with anywhere near as dangerous characters as most big city police forces.
Hmm.
And ICE, this notion that they can't be held accountable when they shoot somebody who's innocent, who's doing, is exercising their First Amendment rights, there should be compensation for that. We know that. Look, Trump wants to compensate all the people that broke into and destroyed our Capitol.
Right.
I think many of us believe that we need compensation for the people that are getting the living daylights beaten out of them. They're being shackled and herded up and put into detention facilities. Oftentimes they don't even get phone calls. I mean, this is like the shadows of real Gestapo type activity, right? These secret police things, and no one hears about it, and everyone's told don't talk about it and don't worry about it. It is really frightening. And I think, what can we do? I think we have to fight tooth and nail to make sure they don't get any more money passed. But again, the only thing that we can really do to stop them is to fight this bill off through November, and then when November comes, make sure that they don't try to jam it through at the last minute. In the lame duck. But I think we're pretty united. I think we're getting a bunch of Republicans that are going to help us do this.
Good.
So let's switch gears for a second to the election. We're about a month away from the June primary. You're on a pretty long undefeated streak here in Colorado politics. So what's your pitch for your reelection in 2026? Why should listeners send you back to Washington another time?
Well, I will say, being mayor of Denver for 8 years and being governor was more fun. My staff says you should never say that.
I don't think anybody blames you, man. This job seems worse.
But I like the fight. And I believe I've never worked on anything that was more important than what we're doing here. I think we've got a really good bill on how to rein in AI, and that we'll get progressives and conservatives. I've got a bunch of, I chair the subcommittee in the Commerce on the Commerce Committee. I share the subcommittee on consumer protection, data privacy, and technology. And this is something I spent the last several years. And I was a mayor, so I understand city government. I was a governor, so I understand the relationship between cities and states. And in that process, learned a lot about counties. And I'm of someone who was mayor of the major city in their state, and then also was governor, and then became senator. I'm only the 16th person to do all three of those things.
Really?
In the last 250 years. And I think it's true that most governors don't want to go be a senator because you're one of 100. But the fact that you're dealing with such important things and that there's a fight going on, right? Our democracy is fighting for its life. And I think those years of experience, 20 years as an entrepreneur, I understand how markets work and how we can rein them in a way that gives the basic working people a fair shot at not having so many expenses, not having so many costs, and ways we can get them better jobs. I mean, I want to spend a certain amount of time in my next 6 years focusing on the economy and what we did. In Colorado, my last 3 years as governor, we were the number 1 economy in the country, according to U.S. News and World Report.
Yeah.
I want to do that for the whole country. I want to make sure that we are focusing on an economy that grows, that quality of life does start with a good job, but making sure that we are from the middle out, right? We're not doing all this from the top down. All the good jobs are at the top. I want to make sure that we're building up from the bottom and from the middle out, which is what Biden talked about. He didn't really sell it the way he should have, but he was on to something there. And I think we've got a lot of ideas now whereby we can create more opportunities for small business, better access to capital, better trained workforce. I think AI is a big hurdle, but I think we can use it to our advantage. We need to have a program where we go out to every community college in America and make sure they are incentivized to be teaching how to use AI to everybody. Because it's, it is going to be, we all know how to use a cell phone now, right? Everyone said, oh, well, a lot of people just won't put in the time to learn how to run a cell phone. Turns out not to be true. Pretty much everyone knows how to work their cell phone. Everyone's going to have to learn how to work AI. And if we can get to that point quickly, it's going to dramatically diminish the amount of layoffs and the amount of turmoil we're going to have. I think as a small business guy and someone who understands state, county, and local government, and now the federal government, I think that holistic kind of approach I can bring to the table.
Ballots are going to start dropping on June 8th. People who are interested in getting involved in your campaign or learning more, where do they go?
Hickenlooper.com. The one good thing about having a name like Hickenlooper is it's in people's in their awareness and in their craw. When I was a little kid, and I had really thick glasses like Coke bottles, and I had bad acne, and I had this, people called me poop and scooper or chicken cooper, and I got LASIK surgery, which I had. Well, I tell you, you talk about people being, self-conscious about the way they look or their body. I would never have run for mayor if I was wearing those glasses. I felt that they were such a burden on my face. I felt, I never asked a girl on a date until I think I asked one girl for a date in high school, and then I was finishing my sophomore year before I got up the courage again. That's pathetic. But that's the way we human beings are, right? You go through that stuff. My mother was tough. I think I told you she was widowed twice before she turned 40, and her first husband was a fighter pilot. She actually, this is something that a lot of people I don't often talk about, but when she was in 1943, in the middle of World War II, she and two of her sisters and a couple of friends took German lessons. Right? Wow. They took German lessons because they thought we might lose the war.
Holy moly.
And that if they did, they wanted to know what the Germans were saying, and they wanted to keep fighting. They wanted to keep fighting the Germans. And I think now people are so frustrated and angry, and what Trump has done is so unthinkable. But I spent a lot of time trying to tell people, you can't give up, right? This is no dress rehearsal. That's one of the things my grandfather used to say. This is no dress rehearsal. You're responsible for yourself and for your community. And we've got to turn this around. We don't have any other alternatives. And, where we don't see an obvious route, we're going to have to make it.
Well, John Hickenlooper, friend of the pod, U.S. Senator for Colorado, former governor, former mayor, geologist, brewpub owner, entrepreneur, thank you so much for coming back on the Get More Smarter podcast. It was great to see you. Good luck out there. We'll be rooting for you, and we will be in touch after the primary. We'd love to talk to you again.
You bet. Thanks so much. Great to talk to you guys.